Hey everyone, Professor Snart here, checking in on a Thursday morning, October 17th. Hope you're having a good day. So we are basically just wrapped up our Unit 6, kind of our midterm unit here, and turning into Unit 7 and 8, which are, as I've talked about before in earlier videos, sort of not a combined unit exactly, but the work that we're doing for this present project spans over multiple units here. So I'm posting this. This will be a fairly short video, I think, just to sort of transition us out of that midterm reflection where you're basically doing your own work as we've done in the past, and now to figure out our project groups. So if you remember, Unit 6 had you doing this midterm reflection, pretty straightforward, and then really important, making sure that you were posting to this discussion board, which was arranged by tentative groups that I had sort of randomly put together, so that you were connecting early with your group as a way to lay the foundation for a successful Unit 7 and 8, where you're actually working with your group to do the assignment, to do the group project. So that was obviously due, just like everything else, the first main due date. I've kind of waited a bit to see how things would unfold. And then I've had to do a little bit of group shuffling, but not very much. So this now sets us up to get into Unit 7. So what you'll see here is the assignment itself, asking your group to build a project where you are introducing us to one poet of the group's choice, hopefully something that's interesting to everybody, and closely analyzing it through at least 3 works by that poet. So again, pretty traditional, right? Sort of a quasi-research project, but you are free to choose a poet that is interesting to you and particular works by that poet that, again, is hopefully to some degree interesting to each of the various group members across all of the groups that we've got. So this just is initially getting us started here. If you work in like Slides or Sites or whatever other Google product, please add me as an editor. It helps for potential troubleshooting, but is also really important now, just like in Unit 6, that we start establishing a bit of a paper trail for our group members consciously or conscientiously, I should say, contributing, contacting people, right, doing their fair share. So it helps if I have editing access to your material, whatever it happens to be, not because I'm actually going to edit it, but it helps me to see who's been into a slide deck, how often, and what have they added, etc., etc. Rarely do I have to do that, but once in a while things kind of go off the rails and I have to step in, and it helps me to have that good history. So again, for the project itself, even though we're working as groups at distance, it can be easy to just say, okay, you do the first 4 slides, I'll do the next 4, you do the last 4. And there will probably be some division of labor that way, but we really don't want the final product to feel like a totally disconnected, clearly like one person did this, clearly only one person did this part, even though you might not all actively collaborate on literally writing like every piece of the project. Something to keep in mind is like, if you were to present this in class, like a traditional face-to-face class, could all of the group members speak knowledgeably about all the pages or parts of the presentation? And if you could only really confidently speak to the parts that you worked on, but really have no clue what the other parts are, that's not really what we're going for. So obviously people are going to divide labor a little bit, but it should feel cohesive and holistic once it's all said and done. Again, lots of latitude as far as how you go about this in terms of like who's your poet, especially if you're providing just sort of trivia or biographical details. Try not to just bullet list like everything about a person. Try to choose things that are interesting, but also maybe connect it to the works that you're looking at. Again, especially if you're finding sources at particular sites, I'm not too concerned that we're citing like per MLA citation style or whatever, but definitely foreground like on a slide or on a web page what sources you're using. So we're not pretending that you're just like inventing this. The analysis, again, probably going to be a mix of these various terms that we've talked about, either specifically or kind of like implicitly throughout our class. Again, maybe you connect some of this back to the biographical stuff, like why is the writer writing about these things or choosing a particular form? Are they part of some other like larger sort of artistic movement? Try to, how can I say this? Try to make it more than just like the intellectual side though, or just a list of facts that you Googled somewhere, or some analysis that you maybe looked up. Like try to really, as best you can, engage even quasi-creatively maybe. So in some ways, the list of things to include here is almost like the minimum to do. We really are, I really am, interested in beyond just the stuff you can look up, beyond just the sort of intellectual analysis of it, what is everyone's like personal response to it? So we're not only doing analysis, or we're not only doing personal opinion or response, but we want to gather kind of like a mix of those things and try to really work with your group about like how are you all going to approach this. So again, whatever you produce sort of has that cohesive, holistic feel. It doesn't feel like a, like I say down here, that it's just a glued together thing from like different pieces. And of course, since you're managing not just the assignment, but the whole group dynamic online, maybe there's opportunities to meet face-to-face if everyone's on campus anyway, but maybe not, depending on everyone's schedule and situation. So this isn't due this Unit 7 here. It's due the next unit, so you actually have lots of extra time to work on it. Again, managing the work, but also just managing the schedules and connecting with people. So to facilitate that, we have our planning document here. You can follow the link here because you'll actually be working in this document. So click on it, open it up. It'll be editable, so just be careful about not changing, obviously, stuff that I've produced here, like my text. And you'll see that each of the groups, as they now exist, has their own little box to work in. So Angela, Lauren, and Diana have done a great job of already jumping here and tossing out some ideas, some possibilities. I'm guessing that the color coding is like by person, which is really clever. I like that. I'm totally going to use that at some future date. So this is really important, right? Even if it's kind of messy at this point, or just possibilities, right, that you're thinking through. This might change as you develop the project, but they've done a really nice job of setting the framework here where, assuming in Unit 6 that they've coordinated like how they're going to communicate with one another, right? It looks like they've decided on text. So they've shared that out, they figured that part out, and now they've started laying a really great foundation for the project itself, even proposing mapping out a timeline here. It looks really good to start out with, so really nice work, guys. And even though we know that the thing's not done yet, because this group has chosen to work like building out a website, they've already built the site. It might be blank, I haven't actually looked at it, or there might just be some draft stuff in there, but it's really good to have that link so I can see that the group has made enough progress to have made some decisions about like, okay, what thing are we going to produce here, and hopefully by the end of this unit, like what poet are we going to focus on, what particular poems maybe. So again, it's not done, I don't expect that, but we at least have some of the groups jumping in. You'll notice again that there's that space for the link, so as you begin to build this stuff, go into the document and add all this stuff together here. So what's due for this week, in addition to each member of the group being in here, that's why it's really clever of this first group to color code stuff so I can kind of see who's jumping in, is, sorry, scroll down to the next thing. Here, we know it's not done, but it's time to get a little bit of feedback or input from your classmates. So one person from each of the group is going to post the URL to the website or the slide deck or the whatever it's going to be into the discussion board here. Make sure that the sharing settings are correct so that everyone can look at it. They don't have to have editing access, but they need to be able to view it. And then everybody is going to reply to at least 2. So we understand that these are works in progress. Maybe you can provide even more like input versus feedback, or a mix of the two. So feedback would be like commenting on what the group has so far. Input might be like possibilities for other directions to go or potential things to do. Play that by ear based on how much each of the groups has produced so far. If you have a group that it feels like they're almost done, it looks nice and polished, it's got all the pieces in place, there's really not a lot of like leftover bits to fill in, don't provide a whole bunch of input like future directions to go in if your sense is that they don't really need that. If maybe feedback on the existing content is the way to go, then do that. In fact, when the person posts here from each of the groups, if as a group you kind of want to direct people like we really need more input or we're looking for feedback on whatever, you can sort of like, do that in a little more prescriptive way. All right, so if we look at our one last thing, based on my group rearranging, this is where we're at now. So if you don't see your name here, you missed the due date in Unit 6 for connecting with your group members via the discussion board. So now you got to contact me to figure out what went wrong and what we're going to do moving forward. So these are the groups, right? So quick due date check then. Basically finished up Unit 6, and now we're into Unit 7. So posting the link to your work in progress by Wednesday, October 23rd, doing replies to those works in progress by the 25th, and then we're turning around in Unit 8, where you're wrapping up the project and it's basically done. You notice there's no reply component here. We'll actually do that in a slightly different way as part of Unit 9. Now is also not a bad time to remind you, big picture, even though you've got a lot on your plate with the group project, is that after that in Unit 10 we have the poetry event. So like I've talked about in multiple announcements so far, part of your requirement for the class is to attend a poetry event, maybe at COD or in your neighborhood or like wherever it happens to be. It's not geographically specific. And by Unit 10, you're going to report out on that event. So you're not attending the event in Unit 10. You will hopefully have done that already or have something kind of lined up that you can do so you can report out by Unit 10. Again, we have our poetry events link here where hopefully some folks have added a few things. I know this is a really cool one that people have done in the past for the class. Other things going on, right? As we get closer here, and if you run into things, really try to populate this because it's not so much that they're hard to find, they're just less common, or people don't actively look for these kinds of things. So you don't know about it like you know that a new movie's coming out. It's just not like a pop culture type of a thing that everyone sort of hears about one way or another. So let's get some opportunities here. And the best way to do it, if you have like no clue where to start, literally just Google it for your neighborhood. Maybe go through your library to find out things. Obviously, if COD is doing something. And if you're not really sure if what you found is a poetry event, quote unquote, by all means just ask me and we can talk about what it is and figure out yes, no, or maybe it'll work or whatever. We try to make as many things work as possible, but you can't go to like a movie and call that a poetry event, or a concert maybe would work if it's a certain type, but you can't just go to like, some random arena concert and call that a poetry event. Okay, so keep that on your radar, even though it's still a few weeks away. So hopefully that lays out kind of the poetry assignment. It's in there in Unit 7, the project assignment, so you can read through the requirements. You should already be actively in contact with your group, kind of figuring out the communication dynamic, and now beginning to think about what are some project choices, and of course the timeline. How are we going to manage getting this done? Something posted in Unit 7, the work in progress, and then obviously looking towards that Unit 8 due date, and you can even jump into Unit 8 to see how that's laid out, right, for Wednesday, October 30th. Still a ways away, but again, because there's the work to do in addition to coordinating group dynamics, we have, right, it unfolds over multiple units. Not something I would ever expect a group to like get together early in a unit and have a thing done by the end of it. Not how we do. Okay, so if you have any questions or concerns or whatever, be in touch with me. And again, more than ever, it's really important to be actively in Blackboard here, reading assignments carefully, and of course, holding up your end of the group bargain here by being in regular communication, responding to texts or emails from your group, giving your 2 cents and making that effort, okay?